In architecture, a door is a promise. It promises entry. It promises exit. It implies that the space inside is meant for human habitation. On October 14th, deep in the Ozark National Forest, I found a structure that broke that promise. It was a 2-story farmhouse, pristine white siding, slate roof, but it had no doors. No front door, no back door, no cellar hatch. It was a sealed box. I thought it was an art installation or a prank. I approached the only window on the ground floor. I wiped the grime away. Inside, there was a family, a father, a mother, 2 children. They were sitting on a floral couch, watching a blank television. They looked like mannequins, but mannequins don't have pores. Mannequins don't have veins pulsing in their necks. And mannequins definitely don't turn their heads when you tap on the glass. I didn't run because I was scared of them chasing me. I ran because I realized something terrifying. They weren't trapped in there to keep me out. They were trapped in there to keep them in. Surveying is the art of imposing order on chaos. Nature is messy. It is organic. It curves and shifts and erodes. My job is to draw straight lines through it. I take the abstract concept of _quote _0_ and I anchor it to the physical world with steel pins and GPS coordinates. I am a senior surveyor for the state. I deal in facts. I deal in elevation. I deal in degrees, minutes, and seconds. If it is not on the map, it does not exist. At least, that is what I believed until last Tuesday. I received a work order for a remote parcel of land in the deep Ozarks, Lot 404. The client was listed as a holding company. Quote 1. The request was standard. Locate the corner pins. Verify the acreage. Assess any unpermitted structures. I loaded my truck at 0600 hours. My gear is precise. A Trimble R10 GPS receiver, accurate to within 1 centimeter. A Leica total station. A machete for clearing brush. A sat phone for emergencies. I drove 3 hours west on Highway 64, then 1 hour north on a county road, then 45 minutes on a logging track that threatened to tear the suspension out of my Ford. The deeper I went, the denser the forest became. The Ozarks are old mountains. They are not jagged like the Rockies. They are worn down, covered in a thick blanket of oak and hickory trees. It is easy to get lost here. The trees form a canopy that blocks the sky. The hollows confuse the GPS signal. At 0930, the logging road ended. According to my map, I was still 2 miles from the property line. I checked the coordinates. Latitude, 35 degrees north. Longitude, 93 degrees west. I parked the truck. I put on my high visibility vest, orange. I hoisted the equipment pack, 40 pounds of carbon fiber and batteries. I locked the truck. I began to hike. The woods were dense. I had to hack through briars and vines with the machete. It was slow going, but after 1 mile, the terrain changed. The undergrowth vanished. The trees became perfectly spaced, and I found a road. It wasn't a dirt track. It was a gravel driveway, but it was pristine. Crushed white limestone, perfectly graded, no potholes, no ruts, and most disturbingly, no weeds. In this climate, if you leave a gravel road alone for 6 months, the grass takes it back. This road looked like it had been laid yesterday, but there were no tire tracks, no footprints, just a ribbon of white stone cutting through the dark forest. I checked my map. The road was not there. I checked the satellite imagery on my tablet. The screen showed a continuous canopy of green. I frowned. New construction, I muttered. Unpermitted. I followed the road. My boots crunched loudly on the stones. The sound echoed in the hollow. I didn't hear any birds. No insects, just the sound of my own intrusion. After 20 minutes, the road opened up into a clearing, and I saw the structure. It was shocking, not because it was scary, but because it was perfect. It was a 2-story farmhouse, Cape Cod style, white vinyl siding, black shutters, gray slate roof, a brick chimney. It looked like something you would see in a suburb of Connecticut, not in the middle of a wilderness area with no power lines and no water main. I stopped. At the edge of the clearing, I took out my laser rangefinder. I pinged the corner of the house. Distance: 150 feet. I scanned the perimeter. The grass around the house was green, manicured, cut to a uniform height of 2 inches. But there was no mower, there was no shed, and there was no walkway. The white gravel road just ended. It stopped 50 feet from the house. There was no driveway leading to a garage, no path to the front porch. I walked closer. I felt a strange static in the air, like the feeling before a lightning strike. The hair on my arms stood up. I reached the structure. I walked to the south face. I expected to find the front door, a porch, a welcome mat. I found nothing. The white siding continued uninterrupted across the entire facade. I stopped. I blinked. I walked to the east face, blank. Just siding and a drain pipe. I walked to the north face, blank. I walked to the west face, blank. I circled the house again, faster this time. My brain was trying to solve a logic puzzle. Every house has an ingress point. It is a biological necessity. People need to get in. Furniture needs to get in. But this box was sealed, seamless. The siding wasn't nailed on in strips. It looked fused, like a single sheet of material printed to look like siding. I placed my hand on the wall. It was cold, smooth. It didn't feel like vinyl. It felt like ceramic or polished bone. I stepped back. I looked up. On the south face, the _4_ of the house, there was a single feature, a window, ground floor, center. It was large, maybe 6 feet wide, a picture window. The glass was dark, reflecting the gray sky and the black trees behind me. I couldn't see inside from this angle. I checked my GPS. I was standing in the exact center of Lot 404. I keyed the radio on my shoulder. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Static. Dispatch, do you copy? Static. White noise. Then, a sound cut through the static. Not a voice, a tone, a dial tone, clear, artificial. I turned off the radio. I was alone. I looked at the window again. Why build a house you cannot enter? Unless it wasn't built for someone to enter. I took a deep breath. I walked toward the glass. The window was huge, 6 feet by 4 feet, a single pane of glass. No dividers, no muntins. It was set deep into the wall, maybe 8 inches. This wasn't standard residential construction. Standard walls are 4 inches thick, studs and drywall. This wall was a bunker. I approached the glass slowly. My reflection walked toward me, a man in an orange vest holding a prism pole. I stopped 2 feet away. I leaned in. I cupped my hands around my eyes to block the glare of the gray sky. I pressed my face against the cold surface. I wiped it away with my sleeve, and I looked inside. The interior was lit, not by sunlight. The sky outside was overcast, but the room was bright, warm, tungsten light. 3,000 Kelvin. It was a living room, mid-century modern aesthetic, 1950s, or maybe early 60s. The floor was hardwood, oak, polished to a mirror shine. There was a rug in the center, Persian, red and gold, a coffee table, teak. On the table, a ceramic bowl of fruit, apples, bananas, grapes. They looked perfect, waxy, A television set in the corner. A heavy console model with a curved glass screen. It was dark. And on the far wall, a fireplace. A fire was burning, but there was no smoke, no flicker. It was a gas log or a projection. The flames were perfectly symmetrical, loops of yellow and orange that repeated every 4 seconds. I counted the loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, reset, a simulation. But the room wasn't empty. There was a couch, floral pattern, beige and green, and sitting on the couch was the family. 4 subjects, 2 adults, 2 juveniles. Subject 1, male, quote 7. He wore a gray suit, white shirt, red tie. His hair was black, slicked back with oil. He sat on the left end of the sofa. His posture was rigid, upright, hands resting on his knees. Subject 2, female, quote 8. She wore a blue dress with white polka dots, pearls, blonde hair in a bob cut. She sat next to him, hands folded in her lap. Subject 3, juvenile male, quote 9, maybe 10 years old, striped t-shirt, jeans. Subject 4, juvenile female, quote 10, maybe 8 years old, pink dress, white socks. They were all facing forward. Toward the television? No. The television was in the corner. They were facing the wall, the blank white wall opposite the couch. They were staring at nothing. I stood there for a full minute. My brain tried to process the scene. Quote 11, I thought. Quote 12. But they didn't move. Not a muscle, not a twitch. They looked like wax figures. Like a museum exhibit. "Hello?" I shouted. My voice was muffled by the thick glass. No reaction. I tapped on the pane with my knuckle. The sound was dull, heavy, like hitting a tank of water. Subject 1, the father, did not blink. Subject 2, the mother, did not flinch. I took a step back. I reached for my camera. I needed to document this. I raised the lens. I focused on the father's face. I zoomed in. And that is when the horror truly began. Through the telephoto lens, I saw the texture. Mannequins are made of fiberglass or plastic. They are smooth. This was not smooth. This was skin. I saw pores on his nose. I saw a small scar on his chin. A shaving cut. I saw the stubble of a beard starting to grow through the makeup. And then I saw the vein on his neck, just above the collar of his white shirt, the jugular vein. It was blue, and it was pulsing, slow, maybe 40 beats per minute. Bradycardia, hibernation state. I lowered the camera. My hands were shaking. These weren't dolls. These were biological entities, living tissue, trapped in a sealed box with no doors. How long had they been there? Where was the food? Where was the bathroom? And then I saw the eyes. The father wasn't staring at the wall. His eyes were open, wide. The pupils were pinpricks, and they were wet. Tears were streaming down his face. Silent, continuous tears, soaking his collar. He was conscious. He was awake. And he was screaming on the inside. Glass is a barrier, but glass is also a lens. I pressed my face against the cold surface. My breath created patches of fog on the pane. I wiped them away with my sleeve. I had to be sure. I pulled out my flashlight, a tactical Surefire. 1,000 lumens. I aimed the beam directly into the face of subject 1, underscore quote 14 underscore. The light cut through the thick glass without refraction. It hit the man squarely in the eyes. The reaction was instantaneous. The pupils constricted. From the size of a grain of rice to the size of a pinhead. This is a biological reflex. Photosensitivity. Dead eyes do not react to light. Glass eyes do not react to light. This man was alive. But he did not blink. His eyelids remained retracted. His tear ducts were working overtime, flooding his face with moisture to keep the corneas from drying out. Why wasn't he blinking? Paralysis? Or were the eyelids surgically removed? I looked closer. No, the eyelids were there. He was just holding them open, by sheer will, or by chemical force. I moved the beam to subject 2, the mother. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, a posture of submission. I illuminated her hands. The knuckles were white. She wasn't just resting her hands, she was gripping them, squeezing so hard that the skin was stretched tight like parchment. I saw the tendons in her wrists. They were vibrating, a tremor. Frequency. Maybe 10 hertz. She was terrified, or in pain. I moved the beam to the children. Subject 3, underscore, quote, underscore, 16, underscore. Subject 4, underscore, quote, underscore, 17, underscore. They were the worst, because they were too still. Children cannot sit perfectly still. It goes against their nature. But these two, they didn't even breathe in the same rhythm as the adults. Their chests did not rise and fall. I pressed my ear against the glass. Silence. No sound from the television. No crackle from the fire. No sound of breathing. Vacuum? No. If it were a vacuum, the adults would have suffocated in 3 minutes. Soundproofing, a hermetically sealed chamber. I tapped on the glass with something harder than my knuckle. I used the tip of my survey pole. Tungsten carbide. The sound was short, dense. This wasn't standard window glass. It wasn't even tempered safety glass. It was polycarbonate, or transparent aluminum, the kind of material used in zoos, for gorilla enclosures, or shark tanks. Thickness, at least 2 inches. I struck it harder, not a scratch. But the vibration traveled through. I saw it. The floor inside the room trembled. The bowl of wax fruit on the table shifted slightly. And subject 1, the father, twitched. It was a micro movement. His head turned 1 degree to the left, then snapped back, like a mechanism slipping a gear. I struck again. "Hey!" I shouted. "Can you hear me?" My voice bounced off the forest behind me. But inside, the reaction changed. The father began to open his mouth. Slowly, the jaw unhinged, stretching the skin of his cheeks, too wide, beyond anatomical norms. I saw the oral cavity, the tongue, the teeth. But the teeth were wrong. They were too white and too uniform, a single block, like a mouth guard. Was he trying to speak or scream? I aimed the light into his mouth again, and I recoiled, because deep in the throat, where the larynx should be, there was nothing, just smooth, pink flesh. He had no vocal cords. He had no opening to the esophagus. He was sealed from the inside out. The tears on his cheeks flowed faster. His eyes darted sideways. To the left, directly at me. The look was intelligent, and it was pleading. Not for rescue, for death. Anatomy has rules. The human cervical spine consists of 7 vertebrae, C1 through C7. They are held together by ligaments and muscles. The maximum range of rotation for a healthy adult male is 80 degrees to the left or right. 90 degrees if he is an athlete. Anything beyond that requires the severing of the spinal cord. I watched subject 1. He was still looking at me out of the corner of his eye. The tears were still flowing. But then, he began to turn. He didn't turn his shoulders. His torso remained rigid against the floral upholstery. Only the neck moved. He passed the 80-degree mark. He passed the 90-degree mark. I heard it through the glass. Crack, pop, squelch. It wasn't the dry snap of a bone breaking. It was the wet sound of gristle grinding against gristle. like twisting a raw chicken leg. He passed 100 degrees. His chin was now over his shoulder. He kept going. 120 degrees. The skin on his neck spiraled. It was wringing out like a wet towel. I saw the veins bulging. I saw the capillaries bursting under the surface. Purple bruises bloomed instantly on his throat. But he didn't scream. He couldn't scream. He had no larynx. He reached 180 degrees. His face was now directly opposite his back. He was looking straight at me, full frontal eye contact. The owl turn. Impossible for a mammal. But his eyes, they weren't dead. They were wide with agony. He was doing this on purpose. He was breaking his own spine to make contact. He raised his right hand, slowly, fighting the gravity, fighting the sedation. He lifted it toward the glass. I saw the wrist, and then I saw the horror that the coffee table had hidden. His hand didn't end at a cuff. His suit jacket didn't end at a sleeve. The fabric of his gray suit dissolved into the fabric of the couch. He wasn't sitting on the furniture. He was woven into it. I shone the light down. I traced the line of his leg. His trousers merged with the cushions. I traced the line of the mother's dress. It flowed seamlessly into the rug. They weren't trapped in the room. They were part of the room. Biological fixtures, grown in place. Subject 1 pressed his palm against the glass. His fingerprints left a smear of oil. And then he opened his mouth again. That wide, toothless, silent maw. He mouthed a word. I read lips. It is part of the job. Communicating with my rod man over the noise of construction sites. He didn't say, quote, 21. He didn't say, police. He mouthed 3 words, clear, distinct. And then the mother turned, fast, snap. Her head whipped around 180 degrees in a fraction of a second. Her blonde hair flew. Her eyes locked onto me. But they weren't pleading like the father's. They were hostile. They were protecting the nest. She opened her mouth, and she screamed. It wasn't a voice. It was a frequency. A high-pitched, digital shriek that vibrated the fillings in my teeth. The glass began to vibrate. The camera in my hand grew hot. The simulation was reacting to the intruder. The house was waking up. The sound was not acoustic. It was a weapon. The mother's scream hit a frequency of 20,000 hertz. It bypassed my ears and went straight to the inner ear fluid. My equilibrium vanished. The world tilted 45 degrees to the left. I fell. Thud. My knees hit the manicured grass. I dropped the flashlight. I dropped the camera. The lens cracked against a hidden sprinkler head. I tried to stand up. My vision was swimming. Black spots danced in the corners of my eyes. I looked up at the window. The father was still staring at me. His head twisted 180 degrees. His mouth was still moving. The mother was still screaming, her jaw unhinged. But now, the children were moving. Subject 3 and Subject 4. They didn't turn their heads, they just stood up, in unison. But their legs didn't straighten. Their legs remained bent at a 90-degree angle. They rose into the air, hovering 6 inches above the rug. Because they weren't standing, they were being lifted. The floor was rising. The furniture was shifting. The house was reconfiguring. The lights inside flared, brighter, brighter, from 3,000 Kelvin to 6,000 Kelvin. Blue-white, blinding. I felt the heat radiating through the 2 inches of polycarbonate glass. It was a sterilization cycle or a reboot. My instinct for self-preservation finally overrode my scientific curiosity. I scrambled backward, crab-walking on the grass. My nose was bleeding. I could taste the copper in the back of my throat. I grabbed my pack. I left the tripod. I left the expensive Leica total station standing there like a scarecrow. I didn't care about the $10,000 of equipment. I cared about the exit. I turned and ran. I hit the white gravel road. I ran fast. I didn't look back at the white Cape Cod house. I didn't look back at the blank siding. I focused on the tree line. The boundary between the manicured perfection of Lot 404 and the chaotic safety of the real forest. I crossed the threshold. The air temperature dropped 10 degrees. The high-pitched scream cut off instantly. Silence returned. Just the wind in the oaks. I kept running. I ran for a mile, tearing my vest on the briars, twisting my ankle on the roots. I reached my truck at 14:30. I fumbled with the keys. I dropped them in the mud. I picked them up. My hands were covered in dirt and blood. I unlocked the door. I threw myself into the cab. I locked the doors. I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the logging road. No mannequins chasing me. No flying furniture. Because they couldn't leave. That was the tragedy. They were hardwired into the structure. I started the engine. I drove fast, bouncing over the ruts, bottoming out the suspension. I didn't slow down until I hit the county road. I pulled over onto the shoulder. I turned on the dome light. I looked at my clipboard. The work order for Lot 404. BMD Real Estate Trust. I took out my phone. I had 1 bar of signal. I Googled the acronym. Bio-Mimicry Dynamics, a subsidiary of a defense contractor based in Virginia, specializing in advanced camouflage and decoy systems. It wasn't a house. It was a lure, or a test site for synthetic life. I looked at the survey map. I took my red pen. I drew a large, quote, 26 over Lot 404. I wrote a note in the margin, quote, 27. It was a lie, but it was a necessary lie. If I reported what I saw, they would send more people, police, EMTs, and the house would take them, or the owners would liquidate the assets. I thought about the father's lips. I looked at the lighter in my cup holder. I looked at the map. I put the truck in gear. I'm just a surveyor. I measure lines. I don't cross them. I drove away, but I kept the coordinates. Latitude 35, longitude 93. Maybe one day, when the wind is right and the woods are dry, I'll come back, not with a tripod, but with a match.